Hey, you're working with a ton of salespeople. I want to jump right into that, which is like AI is taking over. I mean, I was creating music the other day with lyrics that were unique and they sounded just like an amazing rap song about some really cool things of everyday life. So I could have like personalized music. You're in this field of sales, and I'd be curious to know, what are some of the immediate impacts you've seen AI have in your profession?
Well, I think the immediate impact is like any other new technology. It scares the heck out of us. You know what I mean? Like it's like, where are we going? And we think that we're going to be replaced, and some people will, um, but we think it's going to happen yesterday, and I don't think we're there yet. It'll happen pretty quick. It's no different than what the automotive industry went through, what the agricultural industry has gone through, this is just the first time it's come into our world, so to speak. And one of the biggest drivers, and I know you have a lot of people who focus a little bit more on the B2C side of the world, right? Than maybe my B2B, is that so often things start in a B2C place, right? Like we already see this AI thing happening in Amazon, right? Conditioning us to purchase online, e-commerce, all that stuff. Like AI is going to be the first place to go there, in my opinion. But it's not ready to replace the human, and we'll know AI can enhance us, and it can allow for your creative brain to do more. And here's what I mean. If I'm in sales and I can have a machine create a piece of marketing content, right? Or a PowerPoint for me, or, an Instagram ad with an image for me, I actually get to spend more time being creative and reactive to what was provided versus me having to build it from scratch. I might still spend 30 minutes, or maybe I spend 20 minutes instead of 30 because the AI got me started. Still, it's the ability that I get to use much more of my creative brain than my analytical brain. And I like that part. So AI can enhance what we're doing. It will replace a certain level of the low end of the outbound prospecting to a degree. I think that if I'm in sales, or I'm in a traditional sales world, maybe different. I'm thinking like I work for a company in sales. That's where this context comes from. If I'm that person, I'm trying to get up market as fast as possible because I want to sell to larger companies and sell larger deals where there's a committee making the purchasing decision.
I wanted to ask Richard real quick. You use the term upmarket, and I want you to define that a little more for the audience.
Yes, sure. So in a B2B role, in a B2B world, companies they often start selling to the small businesses or a mid-market company. Small businesses like 0 to 25 employees, mid-market could be 25 to 500 kind of a thing, right? And then enterprise is much bigger, right? Now, real enterprise is like the Fortune companies, Google, Zoom, Microsoft, McDonald's, whatever. And so companies love to go up market to the bigger companies because those are bigger deals. They're also longer sales cycles, and they have a lot more people involved. So the more complex and bigger a deal gets, the more humans are involved. If I work for, I'm not sure what part of the world, here we have Yelp. Do you have Yelp?
Yeah. Yelp's all over the world, man. Yeah, for sure.
I don't know. So I'm being an ignorant American, what can I say? I apologize. But, if I'm a sales rep for Yelp and I'm calling, Jason's deli shop, maybe AI will work for Jason. However, I still think that even in that SMB world, there are going to be a lot of people in the world that are a lot like Jason who don't want to talk to a machine. They still want to talk to a human, right? And so that's what I see happening right now, and where I see it going. I have a whole bunch of other thoughts, but I can ramble, and I don't want to do that because I know you've got other stuff to ask. So,
well, I'll piggyback on this because you mentioned a lot of industry are being affected by AI, and this is one of the first time sales feels like it's being heavily affected by this. Other industries had other technology developments that affected them, but I'd be curious to compare what's happening with AI with what happened with the birth of the internet. Because I remember people, screaming at the top of buildings saying it's the end of salespeople because now the consumers have information with the internet. And we kind of evolved as salespeople, and at least that's how it feels. Are you expecting something similar to happen with this wave of AI for salespeople?
Well, so. Yeah, I was. By the way, I'm old enough to remember when they were like, oh my god, it was like 1997. People are going to spend $1 billion online for Christmas this year. Like just the first holiday season, people were going to spend $1 billion, right? Because back then, I'm old enough to know people like put my credit card into a computer. Are you kidding? Right? Like what? So I agree with you. I think we're there, but I think we also have to look at it too. Like it's nothing for someone to go online and purchase a car sight unseen without test driving it, get the color, get the image, get all the accoutrements that they want for 100,000 American dollars and not blink an eye. Like you don't go and test drive a Tesla. You know what I mean? Like, and so this goes back to that point of like, it starts in the B2C world, and then slowly the world gets more comfortable purchasing a bigger ticket item, right? And so I think that's what's happening. And it is happening in the software world, right? And you're right. Oh my gosh, the buyer has so much information about us, more so. And guess what? The salespeople actually have more information about the buyer than the buyer has about us. And the buyer doesn't even know how to use the information they have as opposed to what we do, right? I can go and find personality data on Jason and figure out what his personality profile is, and then have a machine help me write a message that's based on how Jason wants to hear the message, not how I think it should be sent. Because Jason and I have two very different ways of thinking, right? And I haven't done it. I know, you could be more introverted. I could be more extroverted, whatever, right? It just depends. So there's way more knowledge. It's still going to come back to the consumer. And by consumer, I mean the individual or the purchasing organization. When are they comfortable making a purchase at a certain dollar amount without talking to a human? Right. And in that B2B world, it's different. Like, for those of us, like I'm a coach. I know you've got a lot of coaches who listen to your podcast. Like, believe me, our biggest job in the coaching world is how can I make more money and actually work less as a coach? How can I AI myself? How can I have an online course? How can I do all this? And that's not necessarily AI driven, but it's technologically driven. And those two things are going to intersect. So it comes down to when is the consumer, the purchaser, ready to do it? And then when as service providers, right? Whether you want to call it salespeople or whatever, but when are we going to figure out how to do it in a way the consumer wants it to be done?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. I don't know if this would be considered a controversial statement, but I feel with the birth of AI, you're going to have a kind of great weeding out of the worst salespeople. Like, I feel like all the administrative workload that holds like salespeople back from just being more in touch with leads means you don't need as many salespeople, and we're going to demand more from the salespeople. So are you expecting seeing a lower number of salespeople, but more demands on greatness?
Yeah. So in fact, I talked to someone yesterday about this, and now they're actually an e-commerce play, right? So they only have two salespeople, or two sales development people. Sales development people are people who respond to inbound leads or set appointments through outbound prospecting. And they only have two people, but each person runs about 6 or 7, for lack of a better phrase, personas, sending out emails, right? And doing that approach of prospecting, which can work in e-commerce. It can't work in other places. So that the salesperson is going to have to be much more technically savvy, right? It used to be table stakes were that you had to have something better than just email and a phone for your salesperson, right? And I remember, again, I'm old enough to remember when I had really good salespeople, but they still didn't know how to type because they were from a different generation. They were hunting and pecking very fast, but they were still hunt and peck. And so so now the table stakes are going to be reversed, that The company's going to have it, and they're going to demand that the employee has those technical skills. So I do see that happening. Yeah. And to your point, that will weed out the mediocre and the bad sales reps. And that happens on a regular basis anyway.
Yeah. Oh man. So, okay, we have all this technology and I'll load up this question because I think it's worth mentioning, but all this technology is coming into play. Now you have individuals that can reach way more people much more effectively at scale. So a single great salesperson who understands technology can just get a lot of, appointments set, or they can close a lot more deals, a lot less of the administrative work. Are you finding that this taking away the personalization or the humanity within the process?
It is. And by the way, just because you can do more with technology does not mean you're setting more appointments, because every other company has just as many salespeople doing the same thing. So there's more noise is the problem. And so this affects personalization in a huge way. And you can personalize something to the nth degree and it still may not work, right? In addition to your messaging, now that Google and Yahoo have renamed the game of email and making sure that everything's set up properly to help prevent all this noise, that's a big thing. So what I tell people is to think about personalization or professionalization. And what that means is that professionalization means that you're trying to figure out something personal about this person and apply it in a professional way, right? And, old school was, oh, you went to the University of Arizona, I went to the University of Arizona. Now, that can still work if something really cool happened at the University of Arizona recently. That's where it matters. But just the commonality of it isn't enough anymore, right? It's knowing that, if Arizona, I'm a college basketball fan, if Arizona's doing well, I can reach out to other VPs of sales and I can just start with bear down. I hope the Cats do well this weekend, right? I can start with that. And that's a little bit of professionalization, right? Where it's personal and then I can move into something professional. And I think that's the key. And that's a step to your other question about bringing in humanity. Right? And there's lots of other ways, but I'll pause there and see where you want to go with this humanity thing.
Well, I'll say this much. First, I like that you're talking about using personal only as much as it kind of serves the context of the professional message you want to give. What I want to give as a notice is, given that you can get a lot of information on people online, it's not always a professional thing to pull it off if you're reaching out to them. So I could just imagine somebody being like, oh, hey, I noticed that, I saw on Instagram you shopped at Whole Foods on 10th Street yesterday, and I just wanted to say I also shot. And it's like, whoa, that's creepy. The access to information gets to a creepy level, and so
yeah,
do you have like a barometer on where you take that line?
I think you have to go for it until you're actually told not to do it 3 times, because we'll create this, bias, right? Because we have this bias that says, oh, if you do that, that's creepy. Meanwhile, it really hasn't happened that often. But when it does happen, it's our bias that's reacting to it, not whether or not the message resonates, right? And so, yes, it might creep out some people. Well, okay, then, live and learn and move on to the next one. Right? Like, so, okay, so you apologize to Jason. Sorry that creeped you out. I didn't mean to do that. I was just trying to make some connection. Here's what I wanted to talk to you about, and drop you value prop and see if Jason will respond. They might not, who knows, but own it and apologize. Like, that's being a human, right? I can give you a really good example. This literally happened today. I created created Richard GPT, right? It's uploaded all my content, my book. You can go ask the questions. And a guy took a screenshot of him asking my bot if he and I should have an appointment. And my bot said, yes, we should. And he said, can I have an appointment with you? And I said, fuck yes, you can, because that's one of the most creative things that you could ever do. That's personalization, right? Now, that's easy because it resonates with me, right? Like I'm different than a lot of buyers, right? Like I'm a sales guy. I get pitched a lot. I'm looking for creativity that works. But, that could, I don't know. I mean, I don't know that I could ever call that creepy if I put my bot out there. But, if I do, then that's on me, not the person who reached out to me. That's me being weird. So I think you have to be creative and don't let what if, oh my God, I might get my wrist slapped. There was one time in 2019 when I tried this and someone yelled at me, like, really, like, don't let those biases, make decisions for you.
I have to take it back to a story for regular listeners, probably heard this one before, but for the benefit of everyone else. I remember the first time I got into a really hardcore sales role, which was doing telephone sales. And the person reassured me that this is going to be a really good opportunity and that I'm just calling people back, that they basically requested information online. And I remember the first call that I happened to do. The person, I picked up the phone, or, I call, they answer, I say, hi, this is Jason from ABC Real Estate. I just want to let you know that I got your list of, your request to get a list of hot properties. And I just want to let you know you'll get it in the next 24 hours. Is that okay? And then the response was supposed to be, yes, that's okay. Then I could get into my qualifying questions, but they just went, oh, that sounds good. Thanks. Click. And they hung up on me. And I was faced with a choice of I never want to do a phone call again because it sucks. And so a lot of fear exists for people, especially at the beginning stages. Do you find that's even something that kind of shows a side of humanity at the beginning stages? If you're you're feeling like, okay, you're just new at the job. Are there things you should be doing to overcome that really, really quickly?
Well, so I think the first thing is let's acknowledge that we're all humans, right? And maybe the game we have to play with ourselves is that if I'm fearful, is this a flag? And we don't know if it's a red flag or a green flag. Some people could take that story that you shared and be like, sweet, game on, right? They just dropped the gauntlet. Give me another phone number, right? And other people could use it to say, I'm never doing sales again. It's too hard. It's too emotional. And to a certain extent, there's bias in that. Again, my first response is just recognize you're allowed to have any response you want. I don't know anybody that needs to make a sole decision based on one instance, right? Like, as you can imagine, as you see on TV, there are lots of times a doctor, makes a mistake and someone does not survive, right? Now, if that doctor uses that first time as a reason that I'm never going to be a doctor again, okay, I'll respect that. That's them being a human and recognizing what they deal with. But most doctors I know would be like empathetic, upset, want to learn from it, but they wouldn't stop doing surgery. And what we're doing is not surgery. It's important stuff. I could flip the story and I won't in the moment, but I could easily say what we do is more productive to the world economy than what doctors and lawyers do. It just didn't take us a degree to do it. That's another conversation.
I might go down that conversation with you because my
point. my point is this is what I say. Give yourself a little bit of space and give yourself a little bit of grace to figure it out. Right? Like that's the key thing. And believe me, this is not a newbie salesperson issue. Everybody gets to it, right? Everybody gets to that point at any career, in any industry, at anything where they're just like, I can't do this anymore, right? I can't be a waiter or a waitress anymore. I can't be a starving artist or an actor or an actress. I can't be a salesperson. I don't want to be a doctor. My cousin went to, had a great degree and became an architect, like working in New York City. And in his late 20s, he decided to be a doctor. He just decided that architecture was not for him. So we all have that moment. So give yourself that space and that grace to be a human and acknowledge your feelings. And on the flip side, when you're thinking about your customers or your prospects, maybe you got them on a bad day, give them the space and grace that, you know what, yeah, sure, they're going to hang up on you. I mean, it's just like, okay. I had one rep. I don't encourage this. I do not. I had one rep at a job who literally, if someone hung up on him, he would call back and he'd say, "Oh my gosh, I think we got disconnected. I may have run over my phone cord in my wheelchair." And he was not in a wheelchair. Yeah. For those who don't know, Jason's mouth is wide open like a fish going, "Oh my gosh." So he's like flabbergasted.
Well,
But
this is definitely in the gray area of sales.
yes, I'm not a fan of that technique. I do not like lying. I do not think that's appropriate. I do not think that you should manipulate people like that. I'm just telling a story. People can take it for what they want.
There you go, Richard. But I like that you've opened up on this because, from the work that you do, I know that speaking about mental health, particularly in the field of sales, is something you touch on a lot. In my own kind of messages, I talk about selling with love. I talk about how there's kind of a space where if you sell and not really care about what you're selling, who you're selling to, there seems to be a correlation between salespeople finding activities that seem to distract or numb you. And that's why I've seen like hardcore salespeople, like the stockbroker stereotypes around drugs, alcohol, sex, gambling seems to be something that exists.
I know someone in every one of those vices who struggled with those. I know everyone.
And I'm curious to hear what have you noticed in this sales profession? Is it something that the personality type seems to be more drawn to this? Is it the stresses of the industry as a whole that for people that aren't hardcore into sales are wondering like, what's wrong with these people? They're just in sales. What's going on?
In terms of vices and substance abuse type situations, and yes, gambling or sex could be a substance abuse, right? It's a replacement therapy, right? I do not have any data that suggests it's any worse in sales than it is in marketing in terms of that, right? Like I know statistically like if you look online, 10% of the population probably struggles with drugs and alcohol. Like there's that big of a statistic, which has got nothing to do with your career, your race, your gender, any of that. Now, there are always pockets of certain places where you can find it. We know that here in America, the Native Americans tend to struggle with alcoholism. Is that because they're Native Americans, or is that because it became an addiction thing and it's been passed on hereditarily through their generations? I don't have enough science around that, but I do know statistically it's about 10%. What I can tell you, though, about mental health and in sales is, we just put out the State of Mental Health and Sales report for 2024. We've done it for the last 3 years. And this year, when the data was collected in 2023, 70% of salespeople are struggling with mental health. And that's an increase from 23 and 22. So there's a lot of, we did not dive into the causation of this because that's not what we were trying to do when we built this. We were trying to figure out what are the things we can do to help people if they are struggling with it, not how did we get here and what happened, and we're like that to us was not interesting. What was interesting to us was asking questions like, when you're at peak performance, what was your leadership team doing to support you? When the team was hitting goal, what was unique about, the marketing culture, right? Like, so that we could find these moments of, well, what worked before? And is there something emotional attached to that? Or was it just the economy and all that kind of stuff? So we found a lot of correlation. We did not find causation. So super awesome. But, these are the things that that data suggests, right? When I'm at peak performance, it's because I felt I had purpose. Now, that purpose is a big word. Is it purpose with the company, purpose with themselves? We don't know, but we felt that the word purpose mattered, right? It said things like, when I was at peak performance, my leadership was being more vulnerable. Now, that doesn't mean walking in and talking about your your worst mental health day, right? It's when you say you have an open door policy and someone comes in to tell you something, you don't try to fix it. It means sitting there and listening for a minute and going, okay, Jason, are just so I'm here to support you. Are you venting? Do you want some suggestions? Do you want to know how I handled it? Like, where do you want this conversation to go? Like being vulnerable enough to say, I don't know what you want from me, but I'll give you what you think you want when you tell me, right? And then if they want advice, then give the advice. That's being a vulnerable leader. So those are some of the, what were the other ones? Achievable goals obviously was one, when people felt, good about their career, a clear career path. And again, this is a little bit more traditional sales, which may or may not be your audience, but I still think all of us like to have a career path. We like to know where we're going. So anyway, I'll shut up again because I know I can keep rambling and I want to be mindful of your stuff.
I maybe want to expand on that because the purpose side, I think, is very relevant. And I think particularly those who might be more into an entrepreneurial field, I think that's maybe one of the things that makes entrepreneurship the most difficult is you don't have somebody painting you the purpose picture. It has to come from you. And so there's even more burden on you putting in the time and effort to get more clear on that purpose. I'd be curious if you've had any practices you've done to kind of realign yourself to that purpose to maybe help you get out any time you're in a slump, or if you're trying to kind of reignite that peak performance, whether yourself or the team.
There's, I've done them all, right? So if I'm in a slump, I need to work harder and grind for a little bit. Well, yeah, you do to a certain extent, but not till you burn out, right? I've done it where I've been in a slump and I'm like, you know what? I got to get out of here. I got to go even if I left the office at 3, just to go do something fun, go to a movie or go spend time with my kids a little early after school, just get myself away from it. Like sometimes we're so close to it, we can't see the forest for the trees. So sometimes you have to dive in and grind. Sometimes you have to step back and take an exhale and a breath. I'm big on meditation. They don't pay me, so I can say it. I use Headspace, and they have these great, 10-minute meditations, and they've got stuff about stress and, anxiety and general meditation. And, I struggle with food and my weight. So they have a whole thing about how to meditate for 10 minutes in a healthy way that addresses, that challenge. Right. And, so for me, that works. Right. I know other people, I just ordered one because I feel like I need to do it, is you can't see, I'm just sort of like scribbling these little, like, I don't know, weird things on this sheet of paper. But I know a lot of people who do adult coloring books, which are really, you get the colored pencils and they're really small. And yeah, there you go. We doodle, right? Doodling helps, right? We doodle because we need to stop thinking about what we're thinking about. So those are things I think. So part of it is stepping back to find your purpose of yourself, not just the purpose of your organization or your company, right? For those of us who are solopreneurs and working with individuals, of course, our purpose is to help others. It's also okay to say, my purpose is to provide for my family. And to do that, I need to charge people money for my time. There's nothing wrong with saying it. You don't have to be a jerk about it. You might say it even softer than I just said. Sort of, we got to keep you entertained here. I'm not letting Jason say much, so I got to, keep people listening. So,
well, they hear me every single week, so I'm here to extract from you, buddy. What I do want to add to this, Richard, is just I want to just acknowledge how much that plays a part for anybody in any venture. And I think what's very interesting in sales is that there's such a direct correlation to your performance and how you can measure that performance financially than any other field. So like if there's a mental health issue, you could often immediately get that feedback, as opposed to in most jobs, you can kind of get away with, stepping aside, maybe being a little less productive for a couple of weeks. Most people won't particularly notice, and you might be able to take that space. But I find the pressure in sales is the moment something is off, I immediately see my results off, and it almost starts like the downward spiral, right? That we see a lot. I think entrepreneurship even has a bit more wiggle room than sales directly, but it's still very sensitive. And so I love that you're giving us some ideas on how to actually prevent that from happening, get back on our feet too.
I want to mirror it back to you, Jason, because how do you do this, right? So you have your own solopreneur, your own company of doing things. You've been through these struggles. Teach me what you do, because I know what I do. So what do you do when you are in a slump or you're feeling down because maybe you're just having an off day? What does Jason do?
Yeah. Well, there's two things I'd want to tie in. First off, I am living in Bali, so that definitely reduces downtime because I can go take a walk on the beach, right?
Right.
So I definitely do
But
appreciate that.
But do you, Jason? How often do you take a walk on the beach?
Right now, once every 2 weeks. And
Okay. So there's my point. Yeah. It ain't as glamorous as everybody's thinking. So it's not that easy.
Yeah.
Right.
And to be honest, often it's my partner. So my fiance will be like, hey, we haven't been to the beach in 2 weeks and we live 4 kilometers away. Can we make an effort? And we're like, yeah, you get into the grind, you get into the habits.
Right. So
but
you got the same problem living in one of the best places in the world.
100%. 100%.
So how do you do it? So the walk on the beach is one.
Well, I'll say this, and this is a bit of a plug of my own methodology, but it touches so closely to what you were speaking about, purpose, right? So one of the things I talk about, obviously my book, Selling with Love, there's 5 loves in selling. The first love I tell people to have when it comes to sales is to love the impact. And the way you were talking about purpose, I find resonates very similarly. I tell people like, what is the impact you'd make for the client? What's the ripple effect it has to the world? And what are the selfish reasons that it makes an impact for you? And if I'm feeling any kind of down, I've usually found myself being disconnected to those loves. I stopped loving those. And so I usually would take a step back, go back to the drawing board and say, okay, let's say I'm selling an author to do some business with me. Then it's like, okay, what's that going to do for the author? They'll have less stress. They'll be happier. They'll make more revenue. It'll have a ripple, get to not need to fire employees. Like, okay, I get super clear on that. And I'm like, well, okay, this is important. Then I'm like, well, this author's doing good in the world. So the ripple is that if I get them to be successful, then, that it's going to make a lot more people to find peace, because I work with a lot of spiritual authors. Right. So they'll find more peace. We'll be able to drown out some, douchebag marketers and salespeople from the marketplace and actually bring good products. And that's important. And I like to make money. I like to live a nice life. I like to buy nice things. And to me, that's great. When I'm reconnected to that, and I'm okay, that's kind of my reset button. So does that answer your question?
No, it's great. Like I love hearing from you, and it's always nice to hear this thing. And the ripple effect speaks to me. This, the quick version is when I talk to doctors. People say, "Well, what do you do for a living?" I'm a doctor. I'm a lawyer. And then you get to you, and I'm in sales, and it's like we sort of mumble it, but you just defined what I've been saying all along. Is we have a greater ripple effect on the world than any doctor or lawyer ever could. It doesn't mean that we're more valuable. It doesn't mean that we're better. It definitely means that we don't have to look down upon ourselves. It definitely means we don't have to be embarrassed about it. And it's definitely that we don't have to let someone else's bullshit bias about the concept of sales overtake us, right? And so what do you do in the world? I teach people how to make more money than you could ever make and affect the gross national product of our country. That's what I do. How many surgeries do you do? Okay. Yeah, good for you. So I put a little chip on my shoulder with that one, but I love how you described it as the ripple effect.
Well, brother, I think it's a warranted chip, because I think, as you said, looking down on yourself for being in sales, if you can bring dignity back to the profession, I think, now you can actually go there, be proud of the work you do, understand the impact it makes. And God, if we have a lot more salespeople walking around with that, I think they're going to be more effective at closing the deals that make the ripple they want to see in the world. And, this is what we're all doing it for.
Yeah.
Richard,
I mean, that's the first chapter of my book is, yes, I'm in sales. Like, we need to say it. So.
Hell yeah. Well, I actually want to make a plug for everybody that's been enjoying this conversation here. We're going to put a link in the show notes right now to look at The Seller's Journey, your guidebook to closing more deals with N.E.A.T selling. Now, I know we didn't go technical into this conversation, but I know for those who are interested in improving their sales skills, they just need to go and buy the book and get more familiar with your material. But for the benefit of an overview, N.E.A.T selling sounds great. Would you be able to give us a 30,000 foot view?
Neat. Yeah, the 30,000 foot view is that we're always trying to talk about the need, understand our customers' needs. What is the economic impact that they are feeling within that need? Right? This goes back to your purpose, right? In the ripple effect. Then in a traditional sales world, B2B space, it's about getting access to authority. Who are the decision makers and who are the skeptics? And then it's about timeline. When do you want to get it done? And so the book, spins. First part of the book is really about a sales mindset. Like, how do you have this sales health positive mindset? And then the rest of the book is very specific tactics, like questions you could ask people, strategies to approach, negotiating pricing and handling questions like the return on investment, ROI. And so it's part sales mentality, and then the other part is actual tactics to use in sales. So that's the big overview.
I love it. Richard, it was an absolute pleasure having you on the show, but I don't let you walk away without answering the one question I ask everybody on the show, which is, you are on the Selling with Love podcast. So what does selling with love mean to you?
God, I mean, I really like it. It means selling with purposeful intent that does help your customers, and it helps you achieve your goals too, right? Like, that's what it is. And I think that goes back to, can I sell something that I'm not passionate about, or could I go sell paint? Back in the day in the 40s and 50s, if you got a job and you sold paint for Sherwin-Williams, you were glad to have a good job, right? Like, that wasn't a bad job to have, right? It's still not a bad job to have. But I couldn't get passionate about paint, although I could learn, but you're affecting someone's home and where they're going to live every day and the color they're going to see and how that's going to affect their mood and their family. Like, I can get behind it, but the idea of paint itself doesn't excite me. So that's a long answer, but that was my definition: intentional purpose.
I absolutely love that answer. And I find it so interesting you made that reference, because I was at a crossroads at university. I was about to graduate. I didn't know what the hell to do. And there was a booth for Sherwin-Williams for a management training program. And I almost went down that path because I was like, oh, this is great. And I ended up instead going into real estate, which didn't have as much structure, didn't sound as fancy, and it shaped my entire career. And what I would want to add to that is there are some people who are like, I am so obsessed with color painting and I get to do this on canvases, their entire homes, and my passion is there.
Then they should be the ones doing it. Then they should do it.
That's right. And so I absolutely loved this conversation, Richard. It's always a pleasure to speak with a fellow salesperson, especially someone that has your level of experience. Again, I want to invite everybody to check out The Seller's Journey, your guidebook to closing more deals with N.E.A.T selling. You'll be able to dive even more into the mental states that you can be in that can support you to be more effective in sales, and the practical tactics. And as you've seen us discuss throughout this entire episode, mental health, mental states make such an important impact when it comes to sales. And again, just as a recap, we started off with going into the computer side, the AI. Yes, it's coming. Yes, it's going to change the way that we are. So what are the key things you should take into consideration is embracing that technology, because more and more of salespeople are going to need to work hand in hand with technology to be effective, as there's going to be, call it a great pruning for those who might not be able to reach the amount of people that we can do with technology. We're also talking a lot about how, the humanity, keeping that into your sales process is going to be one of the most desirable qualities to have as a salesperson. Yes, you're going to fail. Yes, there's going to be fear. But if you're just going out there, continuing to improve yourself, realizing there's humans on the other side, it's not just you, you're going to be very effective. And of course, making sure that you have the right habits and tools that you can bring so you're in the top mental state. You can go out and do some really, really effective sales, but keep it away from the gray area, even though we've had some fun stories on how it works, so that you can do it with integrity and sleep well at night as well. Richard, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. All the best. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jason. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for listening to the Selling with Love podcast. We have some previous episodes you can tune into right here. And if you prefer the short form content where you get to the point in under 10 minutes, we do have a ton of clips from our best episodes that are being shared on this channel as well. So pick which one supports you the most. And of course, thank you for liking, subscribing, and of course, selling with love.